The broadcast is now starting. All attendees are in listen-only mode.
Good morning, everyone. Thanks for joining us today. We'll get started with today's session in about 5 minutes. Good morning, everyone. We'll get started with today's session in just a couple minutes. Okay, let's go ahead and get started. Good morning, everyone. My name is Kelly Waters, and I'm the Marketing Events Manager here at New Horizons Computer Learning Center's corporate office. Before we get started with today's session, I'm just going to briefly explain some of the ways that you can participate. We are using the GoToWebinar platform for today's session and hope not to have too many hiccups along the way, but please bear with us in case we run into any technical problems. Currently, you are all in listen-only mode. You do not need a microphone for today's webinar, just a headset or speakers to listen to audio. Today's session will be recorded, and I will send you all the recording link later today to review the session or pass on to any colleagues who were unable to join us. Now there's a raised hand feature that you should all see. If you can please locate this feature, click on the hand to raise it. I'll know that you can hear my voice, and then I'll continue. Great. Thank you so much, everyone. I'll go ahead and unraise those hands. I would like to now call your attention to the questions menu option. We will have some time at the end of today's presentation to answer any questions you may have on the topic, so just simply type your question into the field and then click send. Today's session is all going to be held through view sharing demonstration. You can maximize your viewing area by hitting the maximize window button at the top of your screen. You can also use the zoom feature located at the top left-hand corner of your screen for better viewing. And lastly, I'd also like to remind you all that this session is just a small portion of what's available through New Horizons classroom and online course curriculum. It is not meant to replace our courses or classroom environment, but to rather offer you a small taste of the vast list of New Horizons offerings that are
which of the subscriptions we're going to choose for our deployment. Then we're ready to start setting up this. I clicked on that link again. Sorry about that. That was a mistake. We're going to decide. We're ready to start setting up the tenancy. Once we decide on the subscription, we're ready to start setting up the tenancy. So we select our plan. Then before we set up this tenancy, it is important for you to have a valid external email address. Now, this doesn't mean you're going to use a corporate email address. In fact, best practice has always been in setting up your tenancy to create an external email account, something that may be an Outlook account that you want to use to set up your tenancy. It can be a Google account, but the best practice has always been to set up and to provide an external email. So I recommend that everyone use Outlook.com to create this external email and then document that external email. Then you're going to decide, then you're going to click on the free trial or buy now link to start the process of setting up your tenancy, just like I illustrated on that page. Once you have validated or you've chosen your free or buy now subscription, then you'll go over to the subscription page and you'll start filling out the information, the location of your subscription. Now, the location is one of the most important choices that you need to make. The location cannot be changed. It cannot be changed on that subscription. So if your company relocates, you're going to have to work with Microsoft or create a new subscription in the new location. Right now, there's no provision to change that. You'll enter your first name. So I'll enter a couple of examples here. Demo user. I'll enter my business email address, demouser@whateveroutlook.com. That email address must be, and it has to be a verifiable email address because this email address is one that Microsoft will use to send you vital information. If you get locked out of your subscription, this is the email address that you will use to recover. So this is a very important email. Make documentation about this email. You'll enter the business phone. Now, all of these are 512-667-8910. All of these fields are required. I'll put in my little company name and I'll select my size of my organization. So we'll do about 249 users. I'll click next. Then this is another piece that's very important, setting up the tenant ID. The first tenant, when you create your tenant, the first domain that you add will be the default domain .onmicrosoft.com. So I'll enter demo user, demo company, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and that has to be unique. And now if this is unique, it will give me a green check mark. So if this is unique, now that one's not available. So let's just put in today's date, 03/08/2018. Let's see if that's available. Now you notice the green check mark here. That means that company is available. And this requires some planning. So this is part of the planning process I'm talking about. Very important to document this because this will be what you use later on to fall back to if something needs to be recovered. The default domain cannot be changed. Right now, that domain cannot be changed. There is no provision for that. So you cannot change your location. You cannot change the default tenant name, the default domain. That's very important that you understand that. Then you're going to create a password, and then you're going to create the account. Now, that's as far as I can go in this tenant. But once I finish filling in this information, then I'm ready to move on to the next step, and that is filling in the rest of the company information. So my tip to you to start out with, tip number 2, is to make sure your tenant name and location aligns to your organization, because they cannot be changed. They cannot be renamed. Not as of this writing. Microsoft may later on decide on a procedure that can be used to do that, but right now there's no provision for that. So in the meantime, if my company were to change, then I can always update my DNS records to reflect that change if necessary. But normally the original default domain is not the one we're going to use to create for our users. Normally that's not going to happen. Normally we're going to add a custom domain to do that. And I'm going to talk to you about the custom domain later. Now, I filled in the information as I illustrated, decided on my size of my organization. I filled in my organization name that must be unique, and I start to create the account. Now, when I've done all of that, I'm going to have to complete the process by filling in the rest of the information, the tenant options. So once again, the name and the country cannot be changed. The first and last name of the tenant admin, and the email address of the tenant admin. This can be changed. Now, I can always update the tenant admin from my service subscription if I need to do so. I can always add another global administrator. But the one thing you don't ever want to do is to delete that original email. So if I did demouser@democompany.onmicrosoft.com as the email address as I did in my demonstration, I would never delete that account. I might disable it, but I would never delete it because that account is tied back to your original tenancy. Then I'm going to complete the address, the company and information, company, state, zip code, phone, and organization name, and I'm ready to create the account. Now, the trick here is, because there are typos that can occur. I'm one of the worst typists in the world. I'm probably the worst typist you'll ever want to meet. I've been doing it so long, I take everything for granted, so I'm a really bad typist. So my advice to you, the trick here for me is to have another person, a coworker or somebody looking over my shoulder while I fill in this information. So the trick is 2 heads are always better than 1. That's what my mama always said. So I always have someone watching over my shoulder to make sure that I do not make a mistake. So after we filled out all that information, my next tip to you is setting up your tenant configuration correctly during enrollment is important. So create a separate Outlook or Microsoft Live account for this purpose and use that account as the external email. That way you don't have to rely on someone within the company and that person might leave, and that way you don't want to have to rely on that person. You can always have that confirmed email that you can use to receive information in case you get locked out of your subscription or something else happens that you need that email for. So that's a very important part of the subscription. And the other thing I want to mention here while I'm talking about this, the first user that you create during the configuration of the subscription, this user becomes the global administrator of the account. So this user that you create, it could be someone in the company. It may be an account that you're just making up. Whatever that account is, that's the account that you never, ever want to delete. And whether that person leaves or not, or is with, you still want to hang on to that account. So that's something to remember. And this is your new global administrator. So this is going to be one that is associated with your tenant originally. Very important that you hang on to that account. So tip number 3, create a separate Outlook account and always have someone looking over your shoulder when you're filling in the tenant information. There's one trick to all of this that you can use. If I want to create a success plan The key to this is going out to the Fast Track website. Now, Fast Track is one of the benefits of Fast Track, that it helps me organize my move to Office 365. It's available for the organizations that purchase one of the Office 365 licenses. Some of the subscriptions include Fast Track. Some of the subscriptions do not. So if your subscription includes Fast Track, you can start using it immediately to start setting up your plan to configure your tenancy. Otherwise, if the subscription does not include it, you might have to purchase it separately. But the benefits outweigh the cost, because it has all the best practices, all the tools and resources that you're going to need to support your move to Office 365, and you can even take advantage of the Microsoft engineers for personalized assistance. And then at the end of all of this, it's going to produce a beautiful little document that you can use to start the migration. Now, the Fast Track looks like this. I'm going to just jump right on over to the Fast Track website. And again, if this is included, you're going to sign in. And if I were to go ahead, since I have a subscription that's already included, I can sign in with my subscription, enter my password, and sign in. Fast Track will ask me to accept the terms of the agreement. I'll accept the terms, and it'll start the procedure. Again, Fast Track includes a lot of great tools and best practices, and I can get that personalized assistance from Microsoft engineers. Now, it's gonna set up a lot of my profile for me. It'll ask me if I'm a customer or a partner, and then I'm going to configure my country code where my subscription is configured. Then I'll save this information. And once I've saved this information, of course, all of this is required. So demo company, I'm a Microsoft customer. I'm in the United States. And this is the email address. So I'll save that information. Now I'm ready to start the process. It's going to give me a little help here in the beginning, and I can say, let's go. And then I can start a new plan, or I can request assistance right off the bat. So planning, services, offers, and how to get started to build my documentation for my new subscription. Fast Track will also assist me if I'm considering migrating my email, if I want to manage devices, if I want to gain end user adoption. They'll help me build my training videos, and they'll also assist me in any part of my integration with on-premises services. So if I'm integrating Exchange, if I'm integrating Link with Skype, if I want to integrate federated services for single sign-on, Fast Track will assist me in configuring and setting up that plan to make sure I'm successful. So Fast Track, that's the trick right there. So my next tip to you, tip number 4, is to take advantage of the Fast Track benefits and resources. And there's the URL for that. Now, there's Fast Track for Office, there's Fast Track for Azure, but I'm focusing on the Office Fast Track. So that's one thing you definitely want to take advantage of, folks. So now that we have our tenant configured, we're ready to jump right into and log in to set up some identities. So the first identity I probably want to create is a new global admin, a backup global admin account. The original tenant account that I used during the creation of the tenant is my first global administrator. So what happens if I lose the password to that account? I need a backup global admin. So one of the first things I'm going to do is set up a new cloud identity. That cloud identity will be my second global administrator account. Just in case the first one fails or something happens to the first account, I'm going to have that backup. And also another trick here is, guys, only a global administrator can work with or reset another global administrator's password. So that's really important too, to have that backup global admin. So there are basically 3 identity types that we have in Office 365. I mentioned the next global admin. That would be a cloud identity. Anything I create right now in the portal of Office 365 will be considered a cloud identity. That means they exist only in Office 365. And they're really suitable for small organizations. If a small organization is just, 20 to 100 people, and I'm moving a company to Office 365, I may just create all of those users in Office 365. I may export them out of the current identity store and import them into Office 365 to generate those user accounts. But they will be cloud identities. They will exist in Office 365 only, and they will be managed in Office 365. Synchronized identities, that's another type of identity. If I have an existing identity store, we normally talk about Active Directory domain services on premises, but this could be anything from a SQL database, an Oracle database, a SaaS solution like PeopleSoft or Salesforce or even Microsoft Dynamics. If I have any identity store, I can synchronize those identities to Office 365 and use that as a way to move my accounts to the cloud. Now, if I synchronized identities, these identities exist in both Active Directory domain services or whatever that identity store is, and Office 365. And they can only be managed in the on-premises identity store or the ID store where they come from. In our case, we'll consider Active Directory domain services as our identity store. They will exist in both locations, but can only be managed through the Active Directory domain services. And the third identity that we have is a federated identity. This is great for single sign-on. Single sign-on for synchronized identities. So users can be managed in their on-premises identity store and still by using a claim or a token federate to the applications in the cloud. Now, federated identities work primarily with web applications. So this has to be a web application because it requires a lot of different services to be configured on-prem. I'm going to have a federated server, and I'm going to have a proxy server to proxy out to the web. So it takes a little bit more infrastructure and services to use federated services. So one of the tricks here, guys, on the synchronized identities is to understand your identity store. Understand the on-premises identity store. And if we're talking about ADDS, that's a big issue. I want to make sure my identity store is clean and pristine and ready for synchronization. And I'll talk to you a little bit more about that in a moment. So this is the console now that we've created. I can provision users by using the admin center. I can import multiple users. If a small business has, anywhere from 12 to 100 users, I can export those users out of their current store and import them right into Office 365 using the console. I also have Windows PowerShell. Now, if you're a PowerShell user, Windows PowerShell can be quite useful for large implementations and bulk imports. So bulk imports, any kind of repetitive task, I'm going to take advantage of PowerShell. And then lastly, we have the AD Connect tool that we can download to synchronize identities from our on-premises store. So 4 ways to provision users: the admin center, importing multiple users, PowerShell bulk import, and directory synchronization. And again, the trick here is to understand your identity store. So I'm going to come over to my web application. I already have set up a subscription. I'm going to sign in as my tenant account, and I'm going over to the admin center. And this is the admin center when it comes up. Now, I've already set up some users, and you can see by the status here that I've already done some synchronization. So I'm going over to my active users. I can use the menu on the left, or I can select the little tile here on the dashboard. But either way I get there, I'm going to go to active users. And I'm going to show you the difference between a cloud user and a synchronized user. So here you can see that this Catherine Richard person is a cloud user because it tells me that she is. And if I go to Catherine Richard's profile, I can edit a lot of her information, her roles, her contact information, her aliases. I can go right into her contact information and I can make changes right here, including job, location, department, etc. Now, let me show you the difference between a synced ID. If I have a synchronized ID like Abby Skinner, she's a synced user with an Active Directory domain service. So when I look at Abby's account and I go into her contact information, you'll notice that all of this is grayed out. There's nothing I can do here. I can select it, but I cannot make changes to it. I cannot type everything is grayed out, except for a few of these attributes that I can make changes to. But again, as I mentioned, cloud users are modified in the cloud. They belong in the cloud and they're in the cloud only. A synchronized user is actually in the cloud, but they're managed also in their original identity store, in this case, Active Directory Domain Services. So I have to go to my on-premises identity store to manage a synchronized user. So that's the trick. And when I synchronize, folks, I must make sure my identity store is in good shape. So I prepare my Active Directory domain services for migration or synchronization. And to do that, I'm going to use a tool called IDFix. IDFix is a downloadable tool that you can download, and I'm going to take you to the website. Hold on just a second here. I'll bring that right up. Where you can download this tool. It's a GUI tool that I can use to configure or to use to make sure my Active Directory domain services is in a good shape. So, you know, we always have more than one sysadmin working on our domain services, working with our Active Directory. So this way I can go through and make sure I have no malformed UPNs, I have no duplicate users, nothing is orphaned. So I make sure everything is clean, and this tool helps me remediate any issues there. So I'm going to download that tool, and then I'm going to verify that my domain structure is in good shape. I'm going to make sure I mitigate any issues of provisioning and migration. So my next tip to you, tip number 5, is to use the IDFix tool to identify any errors and formatting problems in the directory before you perform synchronization. All right, now that we have our users, we're ready to look at group types. There are 4 different group types that or actually 5 different group types that we can configure. The trick is, in setting up a group, is to know which admin center to use to create the group. So in the Office Admin Center, I have my Office 365 groups. Office 365 groups are sometimes referred to team groups. You'll hear a lot about teams coming on board with Office 365. So they may change that group eventually. But an Office 365 group is great for a project team. So I have a group of people that are managing a project. I create a group called Office 365, maybe Project 1, and I'm going to put all the members of that group into the group in the O365 group. They're going to receive a shared calendar, a shared OneDrive, a SharePoint website for Teams, and any other shared resources that they're going to need, all configured automatically when I create that group. We also have our standard distribution list for email, our mail-enabled security groups, and our security groups that we're going to assign permissions and roles to. Now, I can use the Admin Center to create any of these groups. The only group I cannot create in the Office 365 Admin Center is a dynamic distribution group. But I can, if I'm going to use dynamic distribution groups, I can create them in the Exchange Admin Center. So Exchange Admin Center is part of Office 365's administration centers, and I would go there to create my dynamic distribution groups. I cannot, however, create a security group in the Exchange Admin Center. So there are some differences here. One, Office 365 Admin Center, I can create security groups, distribution groups, Office 365 groups, but I cannot create dynamic distribution groups. Exchange Admin Center, I can create O365 groups, distribution groups, mail-enabled security groups, dynamic distribution groups, but I cannot create a security group in Exchange Admin Center. So that's the trick, guys, knowing which console to go to create the particular group you're looking for. And then there's SharePoint. SharePoint's in a site all by itself because SharePoint sites, depending on the template, determine the permissions based on roles. So it uses RBAC, role-based administration. So I want to make sure that I set up my groups in O365 or Exchange and then bring those groups into SharePoint groups for permissions. So again, the trick is to know which admin center to use to set up which group. And therefore, my next tip, know which admin center to use to manage groups. Office 365, all except dynamic distribution groups. Exchange, all except security groups. That's the trick, and that's the tip. All right, now we have our users defined. Let's talk about our network requirements, because now these users that we've created are going to want to take advantage of the services that we've given them. The Yammer, the Skype, the Outlook, the Office Pro Plus. They want to take advantage of those online resources. So we need to determine, first of all, we need to determine and understand what our internal network looks like. The trick here is to document the existing internal network, where our routes are, where our proxy servers are, and where direct communication needs to be made. The next trick is to understand what Office 365 needs for Exchange, for Skype. And folks, there are calculators galore. We can use these calculators. There are several of these. So my next tip to you in network requirements is to use the bandwidth calculators to determine network requirements. There's one for Office 365. There's a spreadsheet for Skype and a spreadsheet for Exchange. Take advantage of these calculators. The trick is to understand the current network, but my tip is to take that understanding and use the bandwidth calculators to determine how much bandwidth you're going to need. Now, if I'm going to use Skype, Skype to me seems that it may take a little more bandwidth than Exchange, because Skype gives me audio video capability. So I could technically use the Skype calculator to determine bandwidth needed for the whole Office 365 process and subscription for every service that we provide. I can also use Exchange for the same thing. So it doesn't really matter which of these calculators I use, but they're there for your benefit. So that's my tip to you. Take advantage of these online calculators to determine what you're going to need as far as bandwidth is concerned, and document the network before you proceed to the calculators. Okay. Now we have our bandwidth requirements. We need to add our custom domain. So adding the custom domain may take more consideration and more expertise. First of all, we're going to have to make sure that we have a registered domain. I have to check to verify that I have ownership of my domain and that it is registered with a registrar like Network Solutions, GoDaddy, Fat Cow, any of the registrars that are out there. It must be a verifiable domain. I must have access to my DNS console. So I have to have permissions to work with DNS. So whomever that person is, you're going to go to that person and work with them to define what records you're going to need in DNS that will be required by the admin center. And when I verify my domain in my Office 365, I can verify it by adding one of two record types to my public DNS. One is an MX record, and the second one is a text record. I want to change, once I add my custom domain, I'm going to change my default domain to my new custom domain. And then I'm going to set the licenses for the users on the new custom domain. So you know, I mentioned that that tenant domain is specific to the tenancy, and it's very important that you keep a record of that, but it's not going to be the domain that you use for your users. You're going to use the company's public domain for that, and you'll have to be verifying that domain before you can do so. Then for public domain verification for the other services that I need, I'm going to need my SMTP Auto Discover. I'm going to need my SIP services for Skype. I'm going to need my Auto Discover for Skype and other resources for mobile device management, other DNS records. Well, here's the tip, guys. The tip is when I verify my domain, I add the domain to the Office 365, And then it will give me this beautiful little wizard that will take me through the custom domain configuration. It will tell me all of the records that I'm going to need. So let me demonstrate this. All right, I'm going to go over to my Office 365. I'm going to come down to the settings option or the setup option, and I'm going to go to domains. I've already added a couple of domains here, but I'm going to add another one just for demonstration purposes. I'm going to add a domain, and I'm just going to say, you know, companydomain.com, just as demonstration. It's not a valid domain. I'm not going to be able to verify it, but I'm going to click next. I just want to show you how cool this is. So Microsoft will tell you everything you need to do in the domain as setting up your custom domain. Now you can verify the domain by sending an email or verification code for the domain, or you can use a text record or an MX record. I prefer the text record. So if I have not configured my DNS yet to accommodate my new domain, I need to do so. I won't be able to verify the domain through an email. I'm going to have to add the text record to DNS first. So the trick here is to use the custom domain wizard to assist you in configuring those DNS records. So I'm going to click next, and it gives me the exact text record that I need to create on my public DNS. Easy peasy, right guys? Very easy to do. It provides step-by-step instruction, and I can select my DNS host. If I've already configured my DNS, I can select my host from all of these registrars. So these are the registrars that Microsoft, the only one that's in here that I don't see is one that I've used in the past. But anyway, these are all the registrars. And then I'm going to click verify. The dots at the top, you'll see that verify domain turn from blue to green. So that's going to indicate where you are in the setup. Now, once you get this set up, once you get the domain verified, then you can go back to the domain and look at my DNS records that I'm going to manage here. It gives me every single record that I need to put into DNS to support all of my services like Exchange, Skype, mobile device management for managing my DNS records in my public DNS. It takes me through each one of these. I don't have to figure it out on my own. The wizard will tell me what these are, and then I can check my DNS. I'll go to DNS management. I'll choose which I want to verify. I'm going to keep both of these checked. I'm going to go next, and it's going to tell me which of my records are set up and which of my records are not. And then I can use the check DNS to verify my records are ready to go. So hopefully that will load here soon. And if it doesn't, we'll go back. And then when I'm finished, if I'm not going to configure all the records, I can skip this step and come back to it later. So I think I have a slide for this. Let me just go back to the slide. So it's going to look like this again, and each one of these is going to have a red tick mark next to it that tells me this one is not available, configure this one, and then I'm going to go configure the record type and the target of that record. The record type and the target of that record. Now that's still showing up there, so we're just going to move on past that. All right, so this is the trick, guys, is to understand what's needed in DNS to add your custom domain, and Microsoft makes it very easy. So my tip to you, tip number 8, is to use the domain setup wizard to configure your name services correctly and easily. And this is another time that you might have one of those coworkers looking over your shoulder to make sure that you type these correctly into the DNS database. It's very specific, and if you mistype one, it's not going to validate. All right, now last but not least, a governance plan. I know people hate hearing this word, documentation, but let's make it easy on you. To establish a governance plan, It doesn't matter what framework you use, whether you use Microsoft's official framework or ITIL or whatever framework it is that you use to create your governance plan. But always get your management support. When they know you're doing this documentation, they'll be more apt to support your process. You're going to set up your project for success. You're going to set a clear target. And you're going to raise awareness in the corporation to let them know what's coming. You're going to plan for the transition, and then you need to plan for updates, because Microsoft updates automatically, and you can determine when and how these updates are going to be made. You can even, if you already have an update service installed on premises, you can even download the updates and install them through the regular process if you wanted to. So there's no limit. You can continue to use your on-premises update service, or you can let Microsoft handle it for you. Microsoft will automatically send the updates down every month, monthly, every 6 months, and then there's a targeted update procedure that you can also use. So you get the updates automatically. And the other things, before I get into these updates, let's consider data retention. I need to create a plan. As part of this governance plan, I need to have a plan for managing data retention. I need to have a plan for managing compliance and security. And all of this is all built into the Office 365 subscription, which gives you all these beautiful wizards to take you through that process. Now, there is a utility that we can use called Microsoft's Governance Plan, which you can download this governance plan. And the governance plan that I'll just take you right over to that. I may already have this loaded up, but let's go to it anyway. My governance plan, all I'm going to do is download this little framework template, and that's the one I'm showing you on the slide. And once I download it, I can then start using it to set up my project plan, my weekly syncs, my program check-in, and my quarterly check-in, and assign who's supposed to be responsible for that. I'm going to set up my target for my target for success and my governance objectives. And like I said, you can use any framework that you like, whether I mentioned MOF, Microsoft's official framework, and I mentioned ITIL. Those are about the only two that I know of that I'm using today. Those are the two frameworks that I use. So my next tip to you is to check out the Office 365 Admin Help Center. There's the link for that. That's a really great place to go for any administrative help that you need, including existing training videos. On this help center, there are existing training videos. Also, my next tip number 10, document, 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 and use the downloadable governance template plan to make your documentation. And that's probably one of the most important things that I can mention here. Document the subscription, document the tenant ID, document the original domain, the default domain, and all other things that and the other global administrator that you're going to be configuring, you're going to need to document that one too. So documentation is critical to success. And so 10 tips and tricks here. 1, explore the subscription plans before making a choice. 2, document your tenant and your location. They cannot be changed, so choose wisely. Setting up your tenant correctly during the enrollment is important. Again, the tenant name and the location cannot be changed. Explore the benefits of Fast Track for faster deployment. Download the IDFix tool before you start synchronizing your IDs from on-premises. Know the admin center to use it to manage which users. Again, Exchange versus the Office 365 Admin Center. For network requirements, use the calculators. Use the domain setup wizard to make sure you configure your name services correctly and easily. Check out the O365 Admin Help Center for additional videos that you can use for end user training or for admin training. And last but not least, document, document, document. All right, guys, that is my summary. I'm going to hand it back over to Kelly now, and we'll go into Q&A. Kelly, back to you.
Thank you so much, Anne. And thank you again, everyone, for joining us today. If you guys have any questions, feel free to type those now, and we'll go ahead and address those over audio. I'd also like to remind you all that this session is being recorded, so you will receive a recording link later today, as well as the PowerPoint presentation, so you can review or pass on to any colleagues who were unable to join us. Also, a reminder that for New Horizons, we are doing a Microsoft month this month. So we have a number of other Microsoft webinars coming up this month, and they are all free to you to attend. So please visit our website at newhorizons.com. Just click on the webinars link and you'll see a full schedule of upcoming webinars and registration links as well. Okay, it looks like we don't have any questions, so I think we can go ahead and end today's session. Thank you again so much, Anne, for spending some time with us today to discuss Office 365.
My pleasure. I enjoyed it. Thank you. Thank all you attendees.
Thank you, everyone. Have a great day.